Poland is ramping up border defences against Russia. Can it still count on the US as an ally? Poland's long been the most pro-US country in Europe. It joined the US invasion of Iraq and even allowed the CIA to run a secret prison on its soil. And Poland's been cozying up to Donald Trump, offering to name a US base after him.
Fort Trump, Fort Trump.
Fort Trump.
But now the US is pulling back from Europe. And Poland fears that after Ukraine, it could be Russia's next target. So what's Poland's plan?
Poland's a great country. We like it a lot. We're friends with Poland.
We see Poland as the model ally on the continent.
But for Poland, the relationship is becoming more complicated.
Can we be certain that American interests will remain aligned with Polish ones? We have been and will remain a loyal ally of America. But we cannot afford to be suckers.
Poland has done exactly what the Trump administration says it wants, spending big on its military. Around 4.5% of its GDP, the highest percentage of any NATO country. And people in Poland support rearmament. Because right across the border, Russia is waging war in Ukraine. Poland borders Ukraine and Russia. This is Russian exclave Kaliningrad. And Russia's close ally, Belarus. Poland's strongest defence against Russia is its membership in NATO. Members of the Western military alliance promise to help each other in case of an attack. That would mean support from the US. It's got the world's strongest military and a vast nuclear arsenal. But countries on NATO's eastern flank, closest to Russia, are now wondering how committed the US really is. So Poland feels vulnerable. Poland has blamed Russia for arson attacks and flying drones into Polish airspace.
I am terrified, like most citizens in Poland. We are close, we are afraid. Putin is unpredictable.
They won't stop, they'll want to go further.
This war is being directly felt in Poland. And the worry is that Russia will not stop only in Ukraine.
Justyna Gotkowska is a defence expert at the Centre for Eastern Studies, a leading Polish state-funded think tank.
And this day might come sooner than we think if, in Russian eyes, we are weak, we are divided, and we will not react.
Back in 2021, as Russia was gearing up for its full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Vladimir Putin issued a kind of ultimatum to NATO.
Russia is demanding NATO withdraw its forces.
Poland was named in Russian demands. It wanted to see multinational NATO forces leaving the country.
NATO rejected Putin's demand. But for Poland, it was a clear sign that its security was on the line. Warsaw sees Russia's war on Ukraine as part of a broader strategy.
The Russians do it not because they are so cruel by nature or barbarians, but because they want to be a stakeholder in the European system.
Jacek Bartosiak runs a geopolitics think tank advocating for more autonomy in Poland's strategy.
If we succumb, if we give up, then they will impose political solutions, where the highways are built, what energy we buy, and so on and so forth. Because this is what happens if you don't have your own geopolitical agenda and power to defend it.
To help defend its agenda of keeping Russia out, Poland has long relied on the US. But in Washington, the view of Russia seems to be changing.
Purely from a military perspective, I don't think there is a single American strategist who think that the Russians are a hegemonic threat in Europe.
Sumantra Maitra is an expert on US strategy and the current shift in US alliances.
So we always tell the Europeans, look, don't underestimate the Russians. They are a liability in your neighborhood, but keep that problem in perspective. The Russians cannot conquer Ukraine. They're not going to conquer Poland. They don't have the power to do that.
Now the Pentagon is planning to cut the number of US troops in Europe. That's alarming for Poland, which hosts about 10,000 US troops around the country. Most rotate in and out and aren't there permanently. But US plans for these forces have been confusing. First, the US hastily cancelled the deployment to Poland of about 4,000 soldiers, taking Poland by surprise. Then Trump announced 5,000 more soldiers would be moved to the country. A perk of his special relationship with Poland's MAGA-supporting president, Karol Nawrocki. All the flip-flopping has set Poland on a mission to lock in US support. They're pushing hard for a permanent US base in the country, which sounds kind of familiar.
For Trump,
Americans, they want to have a say in European security architecture without bearing the cost of it. This is why on one hand, they say they will help. On the other hand, they say they will not help. So we are very easy to be manipulated because we really want to have the external power that is providing this security to us. But this era is over.
I suggest they shouldn't be doubtful of US commitments, but also they should arm up and be strong and have like backup plans and other military alliances. Yes, you are part of NATO. Yes, you have the American nuclear umbrella. But yes, the world is changing and you have to change.
And as we've seen, Poland is changing. It's building up its own military muscle in a big way. Its army is now the third largest in NATO, and it's growing. Poland's aiming for 500,000 troops by 2039. Poland's defence budget has grown massively since 2020. And it's been on a shopping spree. From the US, Abrams tanks, Apache helicopters, and F-35 fighter jets, the first of which were recently delivered to the country. But it's not putting all its eggs into one basket. It's also spending heavily on South Korean weapons. And Poland's interested in nuclear deterrence too. But we'll talk about that later. So, how can Poland afford all this? Well, since joining the EU in 2004, growth has boomed. This year, Poland became $1 trillion economy, knocking on the door of the world's top 20. But if you consider Polish history, you realise how rare this success really is, and why the country's so afraid of going back. Through the centuries, Poland's been divided and occupied. By the late 1700s, what was then the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth was split between Russia, Austria, and the German state of Prussia. Poland was completely swallowed up, disappearing from the map for more than a century. After World War I, Poland re-emerged as an independent state. But that didn't last long. In World War II, it was again divided by Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union. And after the war ended, Poland's borders were moved to the west. It became a Soviet satellite state and was stuck behind the Iron Curtain for almost half a century. The Polish Solidarity movement pushed against Soviet domination. In 1989, communist rule collapsed and Poland regained sovereignty. Soviet troops gradually withdrew. The new Poland quickly sought to align itself with the West. The Polish president at the time travelled to Washington for talks with his US counterpart. A now declassified transcript of their private conversation shows he had a clear message. After decades of Soviet domination, we are all afraid of Russia. If Russia again adopts an aggressive foreign policy, that aggression will be directed towards Ukraine and Poland. We need to have the protection of US muscle. Wałęsa's appeal paid off. With US support, Poland joined NATO. Poland went all in to prove itself a reliable partner. It joined US wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. And it even let the CIA operate a so-called black site, a secret prison on Polish territory, where the CIA tortured terrorism suspects following 9/11. The European Court of Human Rights later ordered Poland to pay compensation to former detainees. But still, Polish-US ties remained close. So how did Russia feel about that? Well, let's rewind for a minute. Russia was unhappy about the prospect of NATO growing. To address the concerns, NATO pledged it wouldn't permanently deploy troops unless a threat arose, and Russia did not get a veto on NATO's decisions. That agreement paved the way for NATO's enlargement in 1999, including Poland, and another one in 2004. But as NATO grew, Russia accused the US of taking its global agenda too far.
The unipolar model is not only unacceptable, but also impossible in today's world. The system of a single state, primarily, of course, the United States, has overstepped its national borders in every way: economic, political, and humanitarian. And it's being imposed on other states. Who's going to like that?
Tensions between Russia and the West became focused on one key issue: NATO membership for Ukraine and Georgia, both formerly part of the Soviet Union. Poland pushed for their entry into NATO.
There is no alternative for these countries. Poland has seen that quite early on. They either join the Euro-Atlantic structures in some way, become integrated with NATO and the EU, or they will be dominated aggressively or in a slow, gradual way by Russia.
That's what happened here. Russia attacked Georgia in 2008. The Polish president travelled to the Georgian capital Tbilisi to show his solidarity.
Today it's Georgia, tomorrow Ukraine, the day after tomorrow the Baltic states, and then perhaps my country, Poland.
6 years later, Russia annexed Ukraine's Crimea. Only after that did NATO decide to deploy the first troops to its eastern flank. Less than 5,000 soldiers spread between Poland, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania on a rotational basis. For Poland, this response was not enough.
Other European nations, member states of the EU and NATO, have not seen the situation as gravely, as seriously as Poland and the Baltic states back then did, and quite quickly went back to business as usual with Russia.
That only changed with Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. As other European countries started to show support, Poland went the extra mile, quickly taking in refugees and delivering weapons. By the way, today, Polish-Ukrainian relations are in crisis. The countries are arguing over history from World War II. That's a different story, but it could cause real problems, because Poland needs Ukraine.
It's our buffer in the east, and are the same partners, thanks to which we can defeat Russians. So this is how we operate, and this is why we are staunch allies of Ukrainians in this war.
The war prompted NATO to increase its presence on the eastern flank, adding new battle groups and boosting troop numbers. Finland and Sweden joined the alliance in the wake of the invasion. But just as NATO caught up to what Poland was warning against, the US is shifting its stance. No more talk of more countries joining NATO.
It's easy to sell to Americans that you are going to die for London or Paris or Berlin or Warsaw. It's a lot difficult to sell them that you're going to die for Riga or Mariupol or, Tbilisi. It's difficult. The Americans don't know where these countries are. They have no understanding of why these countries are even important in the grand scheme of things.
Poland is also worried about Trump rolling out the red carpet for Putin and aiming to reset relations with Russia. That's why Poland is building ties with partners closer to home. It's been bringing these eastern flank countries together ahead of NATO summits to push their common agenda. And they've invited the Nordic countries to join them.
The Nordic countries have shown that they have a very similar threat perspective to the Polish one and to the Baltic states ones. These countries are the ones who are investing heavily in their security and defense, who are experiencing hybrid pressure from Russia, as Poland does.
Poland's buying new submarines from Sweden. It's working with Norway to develop the EU's first anti-drone system. And Polish forces are training with their Nordic counterparts, like here, where Polish paratroopers joined drills on defending Denmark's Bornholm Island. That's right here in the Baltic Sea. For Poland and its partners, the Baltic is a key focus. Because, remember Kaliningrad? It could be a flashpoint in a potential conflict.
We can completely blockade any Russian traffic in the Baltic Sea around Kaliningrad. Kaliningrad could be blockaded from air, land, and sea by the Polish forces with the cooperation of Lithuanians easily. And if Sweden and Finland join the effort, we could completely take the Russians out of the Baltic Sea.
But what about Poland's Western European allies? Poland has signed new security treaties with France and the UK. There's also a new agreement with Poland's biggest EU neighbour, Germany, but on a lower level. That's because working with Germany is still a controversial issue in Polish politics. For a long time, Poland was a leading critic of Germany's ties with Russia, especially the Nord Stream natural gas pipelines. Today, Germany's biggest opposition party, the far-right AfD, is calling for a return to cooperation with Moscow. But the German government says after Russia invaded Ukraine, it has broken with Russia for good.
These are all good trends that this government is increasing the defense spending, investing in the Bundeswehr. But on the other hand, we see the rise of the AfD, and in Poland there is worry what will happen after the next parliamentary elections in Germany and whether we can rely on such a Germany in the years ahead.
Ultimately, Poland's biggest security guarantee could be nuclear weapons. The UK and France are the only European countries with their own, and it's the French ones Poland could stand to benefit from. Along with these countries, Poland is talking to France about deepening nuclear deterrence cooperation. The talks are confidential, so details are still unclear. Poland's also interested in playing a more active role in NATO's nuclear sharing project, which currently looks like this. US nukes based in these 5 NATO member states. While the US is planning to cut troops in Europe, it wants to keep the nukes there, and maybe even expand them.
Nuclear sharing is completely not credible if the American or French forces are not stationing live in Poland. We need to deleverage the American over-influence on matters of European Peninsula, and we need to deleverage the Russian influence as well. We can't be prisoners of 2 declining empires who possess nuclear weapons. That's why we need to develop, our own nuclear strategy here in Europe.
I doubt that's going to happen for a couple of reasons. One, the Americans are not going to allow that. I'll be honest with you. American strategic interest hasn't changed. We don't want random people anywhere in the globe to have nuclear weapons.
Poland's unlikely to risk stepping on the US's toes. But the country's differences on Russia are growing.
For the time being, there is no appetite in Poland to engage in discussions with Russia because we see Russian weaknesses exposed. But it's not the time now because Russia still thinks that it can win. It still puts forward its maximalist goals.
And sometimes you have to come to a negotiation table. You don't negotiate with your friends, you negotiate with your enemies. And if you think the Russians are the enemies, that they are the only people that you need to talk to, actually, then what is the alternative? I mean, NATO is not going to go to war with Russia.
The maximum objective is to really keep them away, as they were after the collapse of the Soviet Union. Russia could be a state with their energy, they could sell to Europe, but they shouldn't impose imperial agenda on the neighbors.
For now, Poland will keep building its military muscle and its friendships in Europe. It wants to keep the US on side, while preparing for a future where its strongest ally might not be there.